We're going to take a deep dive down there. I know there's a lot of people waiting already. So this one's, a lot of people are going to be watching this. But please don't forget to support Kevin's links. All of his links are in the description box. His podcast links, his book links. You can contact him. We've got Telegram. He's even got his email down there. So please support Kevin's important work. He's had multiple attempts on his life, and he continues to speak out irrespective of all of these attempts on his life. So Kevin, when you saw this happen, I mean, it was really shocking, just to see the video of it happening quite quickly after it had happened. What were your first thoughts?
I didn't really have a reaction right away. I've been so embroiled in helping the court document a lot of these crimes. The information I'm going to share tonight is coming from the court itself, and one of the 13 people who were accused and who were subpoenaed actually has come forward and has provided information that led to what we're going to talk about today. So it's coming from them, just to clarify that. And also from one of our sources, my associate Joseph, who acts like a bodyguard for me, he has confirmed some of this stuff from his own contact in the intel community. So let me just sum up for people who might be new to the show. The International Common Law Court convened another case that started September 1st, and it named the present Pope and 12 other people, including the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, former president of the Netherlands, Donald Trump, and his associate with Epstein, and Cardinal Dolan, a whole bunch of top cardinals in the Catholic Church. And a subpoena was sent out to all of them last Monday. So that's September 8th. 2 days later, less than 2 days after that, Charlie Kirk gets killed. The next morning, right after that, the court received a communication from one of the 13. They're not saying who it was. So these are one of the people who received the summonses to appear next Monday, the 15th, before the court. And as they've been accused of participating in these ninth circle sacrificial cults, all over the world and other associated crimes. This person who came forward, and they haven't identified who it is for their own safety, but this person has sought to make a deal. In other words, he wants immunity from prosecution, and he'll name other people. And that in itself is a very positive thing, because it didn't happen the last time when we put Ratzinger on trial. They closed the ranks quickly. Now the ranks are kind of coming apart more, and I think it's a sign of how much is known now, and more people coming forward. Because on that, a second aspect I want to talk about today, there's a great group of people in Buffalo, New York, including the relative of a Catholic priest who was murdered, apparently on the orders of Timothy Dolan, and because if he was uncovering child trafficking and other things within the church. I'm going to get to that. That's kind of part two. But with part one, what's happened is some of the information that this witness who's come forward, one of the accused, has provided this information. He claims that over the last number of weeks, there have been meetings between what's called Santa Alianza. That's called the Holy Alliance in Latin. That's the Vatican Assassination and Spy Bureau. And they've been meeting with their counterparts in the Mormon Church. Now, don't forget, Charlie Kirk was killed in Utah at a Mormon university, Orem, Utah. And he was killed by a Mormon student. Now, this counterpart to the Santa Alianza, the Vatican Assassination Bureau, they're called the Danites, D-A-N-I-T-E-S, and they're an association group that goes back into right to the period in the 19th century when the Mormons were first formed. When they moved out west, they basically said that anyone who wasn't a Mormon, they called them Gentiles, they were accused of blood atonement. That is, you have to sacrifice your own blood to pay for the sin of not being a Mormon. And these Danites basically go around and kill people, and there's been a whole history of that. Even the Mormon leadership has admitted that they operate. Now, I interviewed a whole number of Mormon survivors, and they described that it was the Danites who were trafficking children, taking them to these rituals, and where they were murdered and everything. So it's a proven agency. Now, this eyewitness says that the Danites and the Santa Alianza were planning a hit on someone, right? And what's interesting about Charlie Kirk is that he had knowledge of a lot of this stuff. We know he was like Trump's heir apparent They got along a lot. And Trump is the kind of guy who shares a lot. He doesn't keep a closed mouth. And there's more evidence coming that Charlie Kirk knew that and might have been exploiting that. That at least was in the minds of the Vatican. They want to clean up, what's the term I used? They want to house clean. They want to make sure there aren't any loose ends, because they can't have Trump and these other guys found guilty and face, arrest warrants, because this is huge geopolitically. We're talking the head of NATO. We're talking the president of the United States and the Pope. These guys, they can't upset the apple cart that way. So they've got to remove any witness, anyone who potentially is uncertain. And so far, that's the theory, that, in fact, the hit was done by the Danites in association with Santa Alianza. And, that's kind of like part one to this. Part two is that one of the key figures in all this is, there's three people to look at. There's Prevost, the present Pope. Pietro Parolin, former Secretary of State, also indicted and subpoenaed as being a prime mover in the Ninth Circle. And then there's Cardinal Timothy Dolan in New York. And now, Dolan, according to this group of people in Buffalo, there was a priest called Joe Moreno. And he, in 2012, he was found dead in his church office, bullet hole in the back of his head. And upon forensic examination, turned out to be 2 bullet holes. Police said suicide. And the only way you can shoot yourself in the back of side of your head is with your left hand. But he had suffered a knife wound and he couldn't use his left hand. So this whole thing about it being suicide is completely bogus. And yet the police, in typical manner, the police and the church are all saying it was suicide. Now, what was interesting about Joe Moreno is he had systematically documented corruption, child trafficking, and everything going on in the Buffalo, New York diocese. He had a meeting scheduled with, guess who? Former papal nuncio, Cardinal Vigano. Now, if you know, Cardinal Carlo Vigano was a chief critic of the Vatican. He accused Pope Francis of being involved in child trafficking. He was papal nuncio to Washington for 6 years, 2011 to 2016. Then he got excommunicated from the Catholic Church. Well, Joe Moreno had a meeting lined up with him Monday, October 15th. He was killed on October 13th. So this is what I mean. The Vatican ties up their loose ends quick. Now, there's evidence that this Cardinal Dolan, who's received a summons this week, he's one of the 13, he ordered the killing of Joe Moreno, this priest in Buffalo. First of all, we got that from a source within the police, a woman who worked for the police and published her own independent report on this. Secondly, Cardinal Vigano himself, in conversations, admitted that he suspected Dolan. There's also evidence of when lawsuits were being brought against the Catholic Church. As a matter of fact, the Diocese of Buffalo is facing bankruptcy proceedings, or so they claim, right, because of all the lawsuits. Dolan personally intimidated and threatened to kill survivors to their face, right? So this guy is not only a goon, but he's completely implicated, in these killings. And we believe in what happened with Charlie Kirk. So, there's a lot of fog when anything that happens, like with this Kirk assassination, immediately there's fog generated everywhere. There's 100 different theories, put out, like the JFK assassination. So people are looking all sorts of different directions. But you follow the hard evidence. This is coming from right within the Vatican. And I mentioned my bodyguard, Joseph. He's from originally Eastern Europe. And he was involved in special ops as a commando, but he also was involved in the intelligence community. He was actually an acquaintance of Vladimir Putin when Putin worked for the KGB in East Germany, right? And he himself confirms it's been long understood that Santa Alianza and the Danites, the Mormons, have a close relationship, because don't forget, the Mormon Church and the Catholic Church are close partners. Financially, the Mormon Church has $167 billion in assets. A lot of that money is tied into the Vatican Bank. They're with the Catholic Church. They're underwriting Chinese expansion all over North and South America. That's the role of the present Pope in helping grease that wheel. But also, if you remember, a few years ago, Pope Francis had a special closed meeting with all of the top Mormon leaders, including the prophet Russell Nelson and all these guys. They opened a Mormon temple in downtown Rome. And that's really weird because both churches consider the other to be pagan cults. And yet here they are, multi-million-dollar constructions going on all over Rome. So our theory is that when the heat comes down on the Catholic Church about these ninth circle sites, and don't forget, we've gone into these different sites and stopped some of them, like the one in Montreal. They just switched their operations over to the Mormon Church. And we know that from 3 of the eyewitnesses I had on my show, which is posted on my Radio Free Canada website, these interviews. April Dutson, one of the survivors, said when she was a little girl, she was taken down under the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City to the tunnel system connecting it to the Catholic cathedral just a few blocks away. And all this stuff was going on that we find in ninth circle ceremonies. And one final point on the day nights I want to mention is it's Mormon belief that Christ's sacrifice wasn't for everybody. It was only for the Mormons. And if you're not a Mormon, his death didn't save you. So you have to atone for that. It's called blood atonement. The blood of the innocent has to be continually spilled to atone for human sin. So in other words, I mean, that's exactly the ninth circle philosophy, that the blood of the innocent is necessary. Just like in the Catholic Mass, they believe the sacrifice of Christ is repeated all the time by the action of the priest, rather than it being, our expression in English, once and for all, that comes from the one sacrifice for all time made by Christ. No, the Catholics and Mormons don't believe that. They say people have to be continually be sacrificed, including people who threaten the church, possibly, like Charlie Kirk, if he was going to, if he was a loose cannon, which is, I believe, how he was being viewed by the Vatican and Santa Alianza. So that's kind of the recent stuff. But what's going to happen next Monday, the 15th, is this fellow who came forward is the only one who's responded to the subpoena. He hasn't pleaded. None of the others have. When you don't plead, you're assumed to be guilty under the law. It's a pro confessio. And at that point, a verdict of guilty and the arrest warrants can be issued, and the reclamation warrants seizing any Catholic or Mormon property or whoever, anyone associated with these crimes. So that'll be coming up, and it'll be interesting to see if anyone else comes forward now that this person has said he's going to start naming names. We also have a back channel communication with Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who was Bergoglio's Secretary of State. He helped do that deal with the Chinese in British Columbia to underwrite the Chinese buying up of the North American economy. This back channel communicators has notified Parolin that because his name's on the list, he's going to be someone who we expect to provide information if he wants to save his own butt. So, hopefully that pressure is going to cause more of these people to break ranks and come forward.
Which leads to many questions. I'll go with the latter question then that came to mind, which was when you said about Charlie Kirk being viewed as a loose cannon. So is that perhaps because some of his political beliefs, he was changing his mind about them?
Good
because
point.
that's something that's been circulated.
It's interesting. He traditionally was a fundamentalist Christian. He was part of a church. I'm just going to find the name of it here. But he and his wife recently talked about converting to Catholicism. And it's interesting because Vice President Vance did. He converted to Catholicism. Now, what that indicates often is that if you're playing ball with the Vatican, they need assurance. And once you become a Catholic, you swear personal fealty to the Pope. It's like a medieval lord. That's what that prayer is from the Middle Ages. It's called the Amixo Manum. You put your hands like this, and the feudal lord would put his hands around yours, and you swear allegiance to him, right? Not to God, but to a man, right? So once that happens, and they're the sworn agents, and of the Pope, they're secure. And that's an indicator. The fact whenever people talk about converting to Catholicism and they're a politician, it means, okay, they're in the club. And that club invariably means the ninth circle as well, right?
Isn't that what Tony Blair did?
Right, there we go. Yeah. And like the Trudeaus, Jesuit educated, all of them. I mean, it's so pervasive. There's only 7 countries in the world where the Catholic Church doesn't operate. I mean, it's the global bank and biggest and oldest corporation on the planet, right?
Yeah. All right, we've got almost 2,000 people watching live presently. So please don't forget to support Kevin at his links, which are in the description box. I'll post some of them in the live chat shortly. We are live, so you've got a unique opportunity. If you've got questions for Kevin, put them in the chat, but keep them to the subject, please. Don't make them too bizarre or too off the subject, because we won't like that. And earlier on, Kevin, I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to add, because I know the folks in Buffalo are listening. These are very brave people within the Catholic Church who are taking on this. They haven't given up. It's a campaign led in part by Joe Moreno, the priest who was killed in his office. His twin sister, Sue Moreno, has led this fight all along. She's trying to get the death certificate reissued to show that it was a homicide. And she's run up against, this is like a one-woman army and her friends taking on Catholic Church, right? And at every level. And one of the things that in the course of me talking with them, there's 3 people involved. It isn't just the kill order from Archbishop or Cardinal Timothy Dolan. There's a notorious figure in Buffalo, New York, Monsignor David Lee Puma, Bishop Richard Malone, who was actually forced to step down, and Dolan himself. Now, don't forget, Dolan was being put forward by Trump to be the Pope, because they've got this kind of American cabal going on, and they want to get in there geopolitically, right, to control Vatican finances and that. So, that's thing. I wanted to plug that for the people in Buffalo, because they are doing public campaigns and, at every level to force out the truth and bring his killers to justice.
Thank you for the tons of questions coming in. I am starring them, and we will get around to them. I bet Professor Hamamoto's got a good question. So I've got another question anyway from what Kevin said earlier. You alluded to that the timing of it was to put other news on the back burner. Are you saying that it was a case of let's not let this crisis go to waste, or are you saying that the crisis was manufactured to get to the top of the news?
Do you mean the killing of
the killing of Charlie Kirk? Yeah. Are you saying that it was timed to jump to the top of the news by vested interests? Or are you saying that the vested interest just capitalized on the killing?
Well, it certainly helps Trump when you think about it. Trump was just being named. He was just subpoenaed as a participant in the Ninth Circle, and that went all over the world. Now, what better, if you were him, wouldn't you want distraction? Wouldn't you want a decoy? So within 48 hours of him getting subpoenaed, boom, Charlie's dead, right? What does that do? It evokes massive sympathy for him. Everyone's attention is focused over here instead of over here, right? Which is the purpose of a dramatic event like that. So, yeah, it helps him, definitely. And if he had a hand in it, he was one of the subpoenaed people, along with Dolan and Parolin and the Pope and Mark Rutte. So why wouldn't he do it, right?
Well, the other thing is the Epstein story is still dominating the news, and it seems like they've just tried desperately to get that off the top shelf, but it's just staying put.
Well, it's not going to go away, and in fact, it's an act of desperation when people get to that point. That's what's so stupid about these people, because for all their wealth and power and public attention, they're really one-dimensional in their thinking, because surely they can see how this is going to blow back and bring even more attention. That's why they don't kill people like me, because all that does is bring more attention to the issue. They want to just kind of isolate, and he should have just shut up and done something else. But he just feeds. The thing about Trump is that a lot of his behavior is that of a diagnosed megalomaniac, and they don't know when to stop. It's like Napoleon or Hitler; they can't stop. They have to keep going till they hang themselves. And this is just another nail in the coffin, I think.
So you've got about a dozen questions coming so far. Well, don't read that one. I got the wrong one. Why could Charlie Kirk want to join the Catholic Church when he knows how bad they are?
I don't know. You'd have to ask his wife, because she was involved in also making noises about joining the Catholic Church. Right?
Where can we find information about Trump being subpoenaed and named as being involved in the Ninth Circle?
Well, it's posted on murderbydecree.com under ITCCS updates. Also, as with their previous court case, It's contained in the archives of the court, which after the case is all going to be released publicly, including all the evidence.
And all those links are in the description, folks. Katie Cat, do you think he was killed by a Mormon student groomed by the Mossad or CIA or intelligence?
No, it was, I believe the Danites and the Santillians did it based on the evidence. He was a student, trying to remember, cover his name here. He was a student at that campus where Kirk was speaking. And again, the young lone gunman, like the guy who supposedly took a shot at Donnie, right? You know, and they find the bolt action rifle. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, the Lee Harvey Oswald thing playing out over and over and over. It's like,
all right, next one. The postman wants to know, how compromised is Trump?
well, if you just look at the evidence and his behavior, there's an old saying, I forget who said it, Mark Twain or somebody said, nobody can rule guiltlessly. You know, once you're in the system of power, you operate according to the rules of power, which is human beings are expendable. And if you get out of line, the rest of the people are going to get rid of you because of the heat you'll bring down on them. And I think Trump is becoming more and more of a liability to these people, right? And not just him, but I mean, that's why, like, when you're in power, you have to keep a low profile all the time. And because so many people who are involved in the crimes with you are dependent on you appearing squeaky clean all the time, right? And that's why they forced out Ratzinger, because he was just over the wall in what he was doing. And so, you know, this stuff always comes around, right?
You've got a lot of questions coming in about the shooter, and you know, things that the police have released about him, down to, you know, there was like an inscription on the bullet, things that you know, all the photos, all the things he'd said in his past, whether he was on the left or the right. Have you looked at the background of the shooter?
A little bit, but I mean, Tyler Robinson, his name is. He was a student at Utah Valley University, where Kirk was shot and killed. And again, it's all speculation at this point, because the police records, I mean, if it is an official hit, the police records are meaningless. They'll all be doctored. I mean, you know, so you're not, don't look at the decoy. Look at the stuff around it, and look at the evidence of other people who come forward and are making these connections, right?
So, do you think that other people will be arrested?
I don't know. I mean, if my theories, or our theory, the court's hypothesis is that there is that Mormon Vatican link to all this stuff, then more evidence about that will come out, including, you know, some of the people, like for probably 5 years, I was involved in a campaign with people in Salt Lake City to bring this stuff out. And the thing about the Mormons is that they have close ties with the FBI and the CIA. There's a disproportionate number of Fed agents who are recruited out of the Mormons. And when this revelation came out about Russell Nelson and his involvement in child ritual killings and that, the Feds moved in quickly with a typical kind of cover-up investigation. They silenced witnesses, they put out false narratives, just like you get in any of these crimes. And so there's a strong federal connection there, and they have an interest in defending the Mormon church. It's huge assets, right? And they're close ties with Rome. So that all plays in.
They wonder whether you've seen the video of the men that are around Charlie Kirk who seem to be signaling using military kind of signals before he gets shot. Have you seen that video?
I haven't seen that, no.
Okay.
Oh, I should mention about the Buffalo stuff too. There was actually a blog produced called, what's it called? The Deadly Diocese. People might want to look that up. DIOCESE. Deadly Diocese, about the killing of Joe Moreno in Buffalo. And there's going to be a lot more about that coming out, because we're going to heighten this campaign, and because we're hitting so many, you know, people who've been named in the court case already, like Dolan and Parolin and Trump.
Christy wants to know if the killing was a Masonic ritual in any way.
I don't know.
It was bloody shocking. That's all I know. All right. So next question. Is Epstein's honeypot blackmail ring connected to the same people as are involved in the Vatican?
Oh yeah, just go to our previous interviews with Sean, and also the last two postings at murderbydecree.com under ITCCS updates. You'll see extensive reference to their relationship. This picture is from 1998, I believe, the year before he and Epstein and Trump were seen at a child sex orgy party in Epstein's Manhattan apartment, where there was a snuff film made with a young Asian girl. Trump and his bodyguard Keith Schiller were both there. And that's another link people might start investigating, Keith Schiller's role in this. He was chief bodyguard for Trump for a while, and then they parted company, but he was head of Oval Office security. And then there's an unexplained departure there. And apparently the rumor I heard through Joseph and others is that Schiller and Charlie Kirk did not like each other, because Charlie Kirk was definitely maneuvering to go up the hierarchy, and Schiller didn't want him there. Thought he was a young upstart. So anyway, people might check into that connection as well.
All right. So just thank you for the super chat, boys. I'll just read this. Even his critics have to admit he knew how to get attention and stay in the fight. His ability to mobilize and push conservative ideas into spaces that often ignored them will be remembered. Do you have anything to add to that, Kevin?
I don't. Is he referring to Charlie Kirk?
Charlie, yeah.
I don't know enough about him to comment, really. I mean, it's not so much, the work we do is not ideologically based. It's based strictly on legal principles and in a nonpartisan political way, because we understand that these crimes span all the political parties, all the allegiances. And that's why it's important not to have allegiances in this work, politically or religiously, because then you're blindsided and you're aiding and abetting these guys unintentionally often.
Yeah. All right. So you've got a question from Finder. What is the Vatican's relationship with Islam?
Good question. There have been a lot of theories about that. It's mostly the Islamic countries like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, that don't recognize the Vatican. But that's all window dressing. Religion, like politics, is just window dressing. It's all about money. And, with the shift of the Vatican Bank east into the BRIC alliance, their close relationship with China, which also doesn't officially recognize Catholicism, even though they help appoint the Catholic bishops and cardinals, right? So, I mean, religion is just a little hand puppet for the masses, right? Like party politics is, right? Keep people befuddled. But the point is, you follow the money, like in any situation, just like you do with the Mormons. Who has the money and the power to do these kinds of assassinations and make sure nobody ever is held accountable for them, right?
So V is asking whether you think Charlie wanting the Epstein files released played a role in this.
I wasn't aware. Did he actually say that publicly, that he wanted them released?
Yeah, I've watched a video where he does say that, but I've also watched videos where I think he had a Trump family member on, and it was a bit of a whitewash. But I think over time he was becoming more against the vested interests, and it was this change of heart.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's often how it works. I mean, they can't. The point is, the court's assumption is that he wasn't trusted by people who had a lot to lose with the conviction of these 13 people, and so he just had to be removed because he probably knew too much. That's one theory. Who knows, right?
So I've got a question here, and I'm curious about your thoughts on Netanyahu. I don't know if we've ever asked you that, but Gwen wants to know why is Netanyahu going on media circuit saying he had nothing to do with Charlie's assassination? Is it a case of thou don't know?
Like Nixon saying, "I am not a crook."
Yeah.
Mossad has the best sharpshooters in the world, and they're often used as contractors. My friend Joseph was almost killed by one of them, so there'd be a natural suspect right away, especially considering Israel's relationship as well with the Mormon Church. And again, that ties in with their ties with the Vatican. So yeah, I mean, maybe he just was trying to preempt something we don't know about, right?
I mean, when I watched the assassination, it just seemed like a military precision hit.
Uh-huh. Not a guy with a bolt
Um,
action rifle. 22-year-old
no,
kid
not
with a bolt action rifle.
it just didn't add up.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot of unanswered questions there. Ruth is wondering about the Vatican and the relationship with Russia, the Russian mafia, and Russian politicians.
It's a murky area because you see, Russia have their own religious system. Right? It's the Orthodox. It's not Catholic, Roman Catholic. It's Orthodox, and yet behind that, there's the whole geopolitical thing. Is they know the Vatican money is going east. That's another reason Vance and others are becoming Catholic. They're trying to keep the Vatican money in the Western Alliance, right? And so it's this dance going on between Russia and China. Like, where does Russia come down exactly? If there was a war in the South China Sea, which people are speculating on, right? And China goes for Taiwan. What's Russia going to do? One idea is that, well, they're going to launch immediately, but that'd be kind of stupid. I think Putin is more sophisticated than that. But the Vatican, back historically, go back centuries, they're always doing the same thing. They're backing all sides. They don't take sides. They go where the power is and where they can extend their tendrils more. And they back all sides. That's the point, right? So we got to stop thinking in traditional kind of, political or religious terms. It doesn't apply here, right?
And look at the people that the Vatican has incorporated, folks. We've got Jimmy Savile, who had a papal knighthood, who was one of the most prolific offenders this country has ever seen. And then Tony Blair, who with George Bush told the whole world that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, so the likes of Halliburton and Dick Cheney could make billions. And meanwhile, they bombed some of the poorest people in the world. They reckon the war on terror has now killed 5 million people in the Middle East, more than half of them women or kids. And he's not in prison for war crimes. It's absolutely sickening. He's just doing this public speaking circuit and getting paid hundreds of thousands per speech, payback from his vested interest masters. So, Mark, Kevin, do you know what was the last successful prosecution by the International Court that is presiding over this? That's the first question. Then what happens if the court finds these protagonists guilty? Thank you.
By international court, we're talking about the common law court network that was established to try Ratzinger back in 2012, 2013, and then things that grew out of that over the last dozen or more years. Not what's called the International Court, because the ICC and the International Court of Justice in The Hague are appendages of the United Nations and the corporatocracy. They have a mandate not to investigate these crimes, right? And they can go after individuals, but they have no mandate to go after criminal institutions like the Vatican, right? And so the last successful prosecution was really when during that period, we forced Ratzinger to resign. Also, we forced out 3 other top cardinals, including the head of the Jesuits, which people have forgotten. Adolfo Pichon resigned 30 days after we ordered him to, right? The court. So it had a tremendous impact. And people are saying, well, how come they're not in jail? The point is they are in jail. Ratzinger didn't leave the Vatican until the day he died, and he went out in a coffin, right? And that's because he knew he could face arrest. The verdict of our court next Monday, if that's when it comes or beyond, can be enforced by any court in the world, and there'll be universal warrants issued. Any citizen can go in and seize Catholic churches, which Native people are doing all over the world, not just Canada now. They're taking back the property. They're saying, you owe this to us as reparations. You don't have the right to operate. You're criminally convicted institution. So anyone can do that. And that's what we're constantly urging people to start doing, because that's the real power.
John said, Kevin, how is Mark Carney exactly involved in all of this? And is he in the Vatican's inner group? And why did the King of England do Carney his throne speech?
I don't know enough about Carney. Canadian politics it's all Vatican politics. There aren't any exceptions. Carney is talking about sending more Canadian troops to the Ukraine. I mean, he's just another office boy. And all roads lead to Rome in that sense. But I don't know specifically. Like we had a lot on the Trudeaus, of course. They had a long documented relationship with the Jesuits and that. But no, I don't know.
Did you hear about Mandelson getting fired by Starmer, Kevin? Because Mandelson sent a love letter to Epstein, which was released this week. And, you know, you got Trump has a relationship with Epstein. Mandelson's got a relationship with Epstein. And Mandelson was the guy who was going to be receiving Trump when he comes to the UK very soon. It's just so incestuous that they've all got these same relationships and they're all just working together. And then one gets exposed and they have to have him as the fall guy. You know, but it's just business as usual. It's absolutely sickening.
Well, they always create the impression that it's business as usual because the average Joe Blow looks at it and goes, well, what can you do to bring these people down? It's hopeless. And they have to instill that feeling of hopelessness. But we find, in fact, on the contrary, when you push against them, they collapse. It's an illusion. 99% of power is based on illusion, an impression of something. And we found that in Canada. We found that, you know, at the Vatican when we were doing those exorcisms and things, and then the tornado hits. And it's like history and the mass of humanity is on our side. We just have to instill in people, in that sleeping giant in people, that we have the power to stop these criminals tomorrow. We all acted together and stopped fighting each other. You know, and I thought of that when we thought of the two protests in London today. You know, you know, the Robinson protest and then the anti-Robinson. Why? Like, who does that serve? It's just inflaming people to hate and attack each other instead of these people who are profiting, the few who profit off that. So.
Yeah, we did a 7-hour live stream covering the rally today. And, you know, there was almost 3 million watching it live on Tommy Robinson's X account. And they reckon anywhere from 1 to 3 million people came to London today. And all the mainstream media are saying, you know, a few thousand people showed up. They attacked the police and blah, blah, blah. But it was a very, very peaceful demonstration of public support. And I can imagine Keir Starmer and his advisors watching this and thinking, you know, the people of the UK are not happy with this globalist agenda that they're forcing upon us.
And you know what I find too? It's interesting, Sean, because a lot of people come not even for the issue. They come because they want to get away from this technocratic alienation we're all in, right? We want human contact again. We want to feel that love and devotion and everything that people have when they're fighting for what's right. And you know, you can't underestimate the power of that. And, you know, speakers and issues come and go, but it's that, you know, there's this new consciousness all over the planet now that we got to get out of this whole corporate system and get back to what's vital. Our children, Mother Earth, our relationships with each other, lawful relations, you know, all of that. It doesn't have a label. It doesn't have one religion or political. We have to forget a left, right, all these dumb designations, which don't really describe anything. The content of who people are, right? And so I think we have to, now's the time when we got to reach out across these divides and say, look at what we're facing. Look at what these monsters do to children. We can't have any more part of their system anymore, religiously, politically, in any way. And that's kind of the higher purpose and message behind everything we're doing now with these courts and everything. Right?
Yeah, they're not just morally bankrupt, but Starmer's financially bankrupt, the government here. They've spent tens of billions on the war in Ukraine and on all this other nonsense. They've jacked our taxes up like to ridiculous levels. And we're stuck with Starmer now still for another 3 years because of the that's when the next general election is. So people are really upset. And you know, the only way would be is if an early election were called. I imagine some kind of crisis would have to happen here to create that.
Well, I'll tell you what's a sign of hope. Like on the 21st in England at Runnymede, where Magna Carta was signed in 1215, there's a group of people, they're going to raise the flag of the Republic of Albion. And they've declared independence from the crown system. They're modeled a lot of what we're doing in the Republic of Canada. But all over the world now, people are doing this. We're saying, look, we've got to form our own local assemblies in our own towns, pass our own laws, take back power, create our own sheriffs, recreate England from the grassroots, just like we're doing in Canada and elsewhere, right? And that's where the hope is. People want to build something new. They want to teach their children with their own curriculum. They want their own health systems and food self-sufficiency. I'm getting this from all over, and that's the work that needs to be done. I mean, the demonstrations can ignite us and bring us together, but the real work is building those alternatives on the ground, and that's what 90% of my work is, besides the work of the court, is doing that with people.
Yeah, and I never thought I would live through a sense that's in the air right now of people wanting so much change. So the next question is from Zish. What strategies can Kevin recommend, ideas that we can implement so we can get back to Magna Carta?
Well, it's the recognition of what Magna Carta is in the first place, and most people, including in England and America, don't even know what it is. It wasn't granting rights. It was, for the first time, restricting authority of the church and the state, and saying, like, the idea that you're innocent before the law until proven guilty, you have to be charged and see the evidence against you, all of that stuff. It came out of it. Magna Carta said these are rights born within every Englishman. They're inherent in you. They can't be taken away. And that idea is revolutionary. We've got to recover that. And we do that in practice by forming our own common law courts. And I've written books about that. The Common Law Training Manual, this one, which is selling like hotcakes, Governing Ourselves, a handbook on personal, political, spiritual sovereignty. That's on Amazon. You can get it. And, so, I mean, it's building then your own community, and contact us and we can help you do that.
3,000 watching live now. Thank you, viewers. Don't forget, Kevin's links are in the description box, including for the books. So Sasha, who's just tuned in, wants to know, Charlie was sniped with professional aim. Does Kevin think the person they arrested is the right person? My apologies if this was already answered.
No, the young student who they set up couldn't have done it with a bolt-action rifle any more than that guy could have nicked Trump's ear. It's a professional job. And I, again, say, this, we believe the Danites, the Mormon hit squads with the Vatican Assassination Bureau did it with consultation with the FBI, quite possibly, because of their link with the Mormons.
Just like the JFK assassination as well, didn't he have a dodgy rifle?
Oh yeah, they proved they couldn't have done it. It was bolt-action rifle shooting through trees. It's so ridiculous.
Is the Orthodox Church involved?
I don't know. You'd have to say why you think they are. I mean, they have no love lost with the Vatican. I mean, an example, the Vatican sponsored the third largest death camp in Europe in the 1940s during World War II, Yevsanovich death camp, to kill 800,000 Serbs because they were Orthodox. It was run by the Archbishop of Sarajevo, Ivan Saric. Pope Innocent XII sponsored this death camp. And then a lot of these guys were brought to America under Project Paperclip after the war. So they buried the knowledge of all that. But no, the Orthodox, that's why there was so much civil war in Serbia and when Yugoslavia broke up, because, 1 million of your people slaughtered. What are they going to do in retaliation, right? I mean, so yeah, there's a long bloody history, with a cross on top of it.
Ron wants to know, is there evidence that the Jesuits are involved at the highest level?
They're behind everything financially, the real power behind the throne in Rome. And Citibank, Bank of America, I mean, heavily invested Jesuit money. So, I mean, yeah.
Dred's question, we've already talked about the looks like signals. Kevin's not seen that video. I've seen it. It is quite suspicious. So Goldie, are politics coming to an end as we know it, as we start to see that politics only are a screen for what is really going on?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, don't forget, politics comes from the Greek word polis, which just means the city of Athens, where they first practiced direct democracy. And, we talk about that in there. So politics itself isn't a bad word. It's just being associated with corruption and betrayed hopes and vote rigging.
Someone just sent me some news on the Epstein files. Let me just see if that is, if that's just come up or not. No, I don't see anything new there on that. Anytime past hour. No, I don't see any new news on that, so that's nothing. All right, so I'll go to the next question. Let's see, where was I? You know, so we've done that one. We've done Benjamin Netanyahu. Does Kevin think Tyler Robinson's boyfriend, Lance Twiggs, knew about the shooting?
I don't know. You see, I haven't looked at a lot of the detailed evidence the court has yet. I was just notified about this person that came forward. So I'm not sure about that one.
People all of a sudden have complete confidence in the FBI. How can we believe them today? That's very telling. Be careful. JFK, 9/11, FBI, Mossad. Yeah, that's a good point, isn't it?
Yeah, right. All power acts the same.
What are your thoughts on the FBI? Are they just an enforcement arm for the globalists?
Well, like every agency now in so-called government is in any country, right? That's it. We're in a corporatocracy, right? And you don't last long, like I demonstrated. You don't last long in any institution if you try to confront that, and start digging up the graves, right?
Does Kevin believe there is a good chance they will unalive the shooter that they've pinned it on? That the shooter will end up mysteriously dying?
Again, to do that, I'm often divided on that. I mean, in a way, they don't care because they're above the law and they run everything and they know they can get away with anything. So why do they have to demonstrate it to people, right? So I'm not sure. I don't even know if that matters. We can't get distracted by this too much, but keep on the hard evidence. Right?
Does Kevin know about the Knights Templar? Come on, secret lady. Kevin has divulged 2 more components of the Vatican I've never even heard of this evening.
Well,
It's
yeah,
like,
I know. Well, yeah, I mean, the Templars, it was funny, just a little anecdote, if you don't mind. When I was in Europe, somebody came up to me and she said, Kevin, I've done a psychic reading on you, and you're the reincarnation of Jacques de Molay. And I said, oh, you mean the last Grand Master of the Templars who was burned alive outside Notre Dame? And I said, it's funny, I don't have dreams about being burned alive. So anyway. But anyway, they got killed because they were so rich in the Vatican and the King of France wanted their money, right? It's one of the reasons they got wiped out. They were the first bank, I believe, in Europe.
Always a financial interest. Mark, just wondering, Kevin, how are you doing? How is everyday life and where does your energy come from? Can you give us a Bible verse to cheer us all up?
Thank you, Mark, for asking that, because nobody ever does, or very rarely. It's a challenge, but I get strength the more I do this thing, because if you live long enough, you get strong and you get really clear about what needs to be done. And so it's kind of a selection process. Anyone who lasts long in this work has achieved that strength, and I get strength all the time. Like, for example, these folks in Buffalo, New York, who are putting their lives on the line for this murdered priest, Joe Moreno, right, in his memory and what he tried to bring out. And so we hold each other up all the time, and that's why we got to always remember we do this together. And we got to, like I talked about earlier, forming our own communities, having as much human contact with each other. That's what keeps us going. And Bible verse, well, there's lots of them. But I remember Psalm 27 says, unless God lays the foundation, you build on sand. And if you're an atheist, you even believe you build on truth. You build on what is real, and that's your most solid foundation. So anyway, we can write to me. We'll talk more about this.
So Patrick on X is saying, is this the beginning of the Utah LDS state AG, etc., being exposed for covering up crimes, corruption, human transportation?
It'll help. I mean, it's already been exposed. Like 10 years ago, Asia Dutson and other Mormon survivors were telling me that time and again, they showed how the FBI, Homeland Security came in and were covering for these guys. Hard evidence. There were attempted lawsuits. So the problem isn't evidence or any of that. It's creating new systems where we can fight back and win and not rely on the present court or government at all. And that's a long, hard struggle, but we've got to start building our own courts and our own sheriffs and our own means of protecting our children ourselves, right?
Sylvia Do you see a movement against the elite and all the corrupt leaders organizations starting up soon, or is it in the making as we speak?
It's been going on a long time, and what we do is just one piece of many pieces, and but it's all got the same kind of hundredth monkey phenomena happening. Everyone's now getting the same idea that self-governance, sovereignty is not just for myself, it's for all of us. It's a spiritual and political thing too. But you can't get it through the present system. You got to recreate it on the ground. I'm in touch. We have conference calls all over the world, people in over a dozen countries now who are doing this. And so I urge anyone watching to get in touch with us, and we can plug you in wherever you are to that whole really life-giving movement that's reclaiming our planet, all of us. Right?
Troll wants to know, why did this have to happen right now? How does it fit into the big picture?
Oh, you mean the killing?
Yes.
And all of this? It's another maggot on a dying corpse, or a dead corpse. It's another symptom of something much more fundamental we all have to do. And it starts by looking in the mirror and saying, how am I complicit in this? Not a stranger I've ever met, but how am I contributing to this problem? What am I doing right now? Not talking, but what am I doing to help save one child's life? And that we're giving you the means to do that. So again, contact us. Right.
Next question from Abundantly. How can we, the people, take back power from the Ninth Circle cabal? Seems like everyone in power is complicit.
Well, we've shown in the past, and that's why I really urge folks to go to murderbydecree.com and look at all our old videos and our history. There's a video posted there. One of the first times we occupied the Catholic Church in Vancouver, me and a lot of Indigenous survivors of these death camps, they call, church school, residential schools. And to see the priest run out the back door when we showed up, and to see all of the people in the pews stand up when we had a banner saying all the children need a proper burial, and our elders were drumming, and they all just stood up. They weren't hostile. They knew we were doing the right thing. They didn't want to be part of this, but they're caught in it. You're born into a system. It controls, especially Catholics. They're very fear-based in a lot of their beliefs. And so we don't attack them. We say, come out, pull out of these institutions, and they'll collapse. That's all you have to do. Just pull out, and we'll start again. Yeah.
Do you think martial law will happen soon?
It's already here. It just it's like being on the top level of the Titanic, and you don't realize the water's rising yet. But all the people I work with on the ground, they're already facing martial law. People disappear all the time. They're thrown in prison for years with no charges. I mean, that's the thing, to realize that it's happening all over to our neighbors and people we don't even know about. And so when it reaches you, if you haven't got involved in this fight back, it'll be too late. So look beyond your own confine to what's happening.
Do you think Trump really got shot in the ear?
I don't know. It's a good story. I mean, whoever did it was a good shot. It wasn't that kid. Whoever did do it.
How do you know what banks have Jesuit money, and what agreements do they make to get this money?
There's a good group in Europe called concordatwatch.eu. And some of the researchers have established this about, you see, Vatican finances are difficult because it's a closed society. You can't know who their investors are, their directors. They're extraterritorial, like the City of London and DC, like they claim to be above all laws. So it's hard to monitor, like those two, in a show last time, we talked about the two Deutsche Bank guys who were murdered because they were coming forward. They were sharing information about the Vatican finances. So, but Concordat Watch looks at the agreement between governments around the world and the Vatican, where they take about between 2 and 3% of your tax money and channel it right to the Vatican Bank without your knowledge or permission. And that's, in the course of doing that, they've discovered this whole reach of the Jesuits, who operate under many different names, but you can trace them back. There was a woman, Dr. Catherine Horton, who showed that about 85% of all bank deposits in the world go through offshore accounts into the Vatican Bank and the Bank of International Settlements in Geneva. And so, it's through those sources.
All right, next question is, Do you think that the police and the military will stand with the people or not?
Well, it takes effort on our part to do that. We've got to reach them. We often, in the Republic movement, we approach police off duty, never when they're on duty, in their homes, in their community, and recruit them, get them to take oaths to the Republic and support the people. And you can do that all the time. You need to do that. We invite police all the time to our common law training workshops because they don't know this stuff. They've just been raised in statute law, enforcing statute, right? That's all they know about the law. So yeah, you got to get them on our side. That takes consistent effort, right?
Do you think that the cabal is trying to start a race war?
What's the best way to pit people against each other? That the hysteria and fear about foreigners, right? Illegal immigration, all of that stuff. My friend Frank Erminskin, he's a Cree elder. He lives downtown on the street in Vancouver, and he had a sign says combating illegal immigration since 1492, right? So it's like, who are the illegal immigrants? Well, all of us at some point. So
yeah, they're creating a lot of division through it. So would a military takeover of Congress to clean up the corruption be possible? Where is the military in all of these problems?
I'm not sure in terms of America. There's different ideas about that. Traditionally, military coups only worsen a problem, and create even and inflame civil war, which could be one of the agendas. I know China will benefit if that happens.
So regarding you said one of the 13 is willing to talk, but Barbara's asking, won't this risk this person's life?
Well, they'd have to kill all 13 of them because we haven't said who it is. So that's all the information I got, that one of them wants to make a deal. That's all I've been given so far, but more will come out.
All right, next question is, do you think the killing of Charlie was to start a civil war to further the downfall of the US?
No, I think it was just house cleaning by the Vatican because of this court case and the fact that, you see, it isn't just our court case. Groups all over the world are picking this up. And the fact that NATO, think for a moment, the head of NATO, proven participant in the Ninth Circle, Mark Rutte. And according to Anne-Marie von Bienberg, he was present at ceremonies where these children were slaughtered, right? And then he covered it up and he put out, as president of the Netherlands, he was named as a child trafficker and charges were brought against him. And of course, political immunity got off and everything, but why would they put someone like that into head NATO who's now rattling the sabers against Russia? This has tremendous geopolitical consequences. So naturally, they want to tie up loose ends. They don't want this thing to get out of hand because if you're a ruler in any system, the last thing you can have is instability. It cuts into your profits, right? And so, yeah, that's basically what's happening, I think.
All right, next question. Will the elites ever give up?
Why would they?
Why would they indeed?
And similarly, why should we ever give up?
It doesn't matter how much power or wealth they've got. They just seem to want more. It's insatiable.
Yeah, it's a psychopathic condition, and they're the most trapped are the people in power, right? That's the thing to understand. And you saw it in the Roman Empire when it fell apart. Any empire in decline, and now in a world empire, leaders make increasingly irrational decisions, almost designed to self-destruct. So insanity increases as you go up in the system. That's why the last people you should be worrying about or consulting are the official rulers,
So Liz, was Charlie killed because he challenged the elite agenda? So earlier on, Liz, we talked about him having a change of heart, it seems, about some of the big political issues. And, that would have not got down very well with the vested interests. Candice Owens did a good 150,000 watching her live. She talked about her complete history with Charlie Kirk going back to 2017, whereby they just drove to all the different states, and that's how they raised their profiles, even came to the UK. And they both had very similar beliefs when they started out, but then they diverged. but I think that Charlie was coming around on a few of the other issues, it seems, which may have made him a threat to the people who are trying to protect those interests.
You never know about when assassinations happen. Do you remember when Pope John Paul I was dead after 28 days in office? Okay. And everyone was saying, oh, it's because he was looking at the Vatican bank and challenging corruption. Well, that's part of the story, but it also is never mentioned that he was from Milan, and the Banco Ambrosiano was a competitor with the Vatican bank, and he was representing their interest. And so what he was doing was maneuvering to get his financial backers into a better position vis-a-vis the Vatican bank. So it was another member of the inside group trying to get better benefits. He wasn't just this immaculate saint trying to change things. That's those black and white images. Nobody is ever black and white. Everyone has competing agendas. Everybody, to get into power, you play the game. You have to. So, I mean, I think people need to be more objective and neutral when they're looking at people in power and not project their light onto them like we project our darkness onto public figures.
When did the Pope-mobile come into effect, and why was that introduced? Remember the bulletproof Pope-mobile? I remember when I was a kid, it was all over the news.
Well, because people find out this stuff. They find out that these popes are involved in ritual slaughter of children, right? So, I mean, yeah, no wonder they're worried about getting shot at.
Danny wants to know, can the population achieve the implementation of congressional term limits via a constitutional convention?
I'm not sure what that all means. Congressional term limits. But
could you simplify that question, please, Danny? Because it is a bit of a tongue twister for us. Let's see. Do you follow Candace Owens at all?
I haven't had the time to follow anybody, but over the last little while. But you know.
Yeah. All right. Chat's coming in so fast. We've got almost 3,500 watching live. Do you think that anyone else could be next after Charlie Kirk on that hit list?
Undoubtedly, because they want to clean up. Like, there will be more deaths. You know, you just look down, like I say, go to murderbydecree.com, the latest posting that ITCCS updates. You will see the list of the 13. And this includes the head of Pfizer Pharmaceutical, the heads of churches in Canada and around the world. These people are all directly implicated in the same network, Ninth Circle Network. It's why that Joe Marino was killed in Buffalo. He inadvertently discovered how huge the Ninth Circle is in the Buffalo, Lake Erie, Lake Ontario region. We're finding out, I mentioned before about the freezer full of skeletons found on the shore of Lake Erie across from Cleveland. That whole network in there is traditionally a big area, and Joe Moreno uncovered that, just like I got canned by the church by inadvertently stumbling across these graves of children, the Indian school. So, yes, of course, there's going to be more murders and people disappearing, including within our court. I didn't mention that 2 of our judges were actually attacked physically right after the court opened. 2 guys, and not 2. They were gang stalked and then attacked by guys in black, and that's why we shut down. We got cyber hacked. We've been under assault, and it'll only get worse the closer you get to something. So, yes, the answer is yes.
Sega wants to know, do you think Kirk was a true Christian, or was he more about himself and wealth and gain and power?
I don't know what a true Christian is. It depends on your interpretation, you know, because Christianity, like all religions, is a political force, and people define things according to ideology, not faith. So I don't want to say, I don't even know the guy. I never met him. I don't know anything about him. So how can I judge him? But if you gain to get into power, you play the game, and religion is a springboard to do that, right? That's how you get votes.
Sika, if you watch the video that Candace put out, showing, you know, going back to 2017 and the genesis of them going on tour, Charlie Kirk comes across as a very innocent young person, in my opinion, and he seemed sincere in his beliefs. You know, over time, whether that changed, I don't know, but he didn't strike me as someone who was Machiavellian or anything like that.
He was only 31. Don't forget. Give him time. It's like
Yeah.
give him time, right? I mean, you got to make a choice in life. If you want into the system, you leave your principles at the door, and you rule according to power, which has its own justification. So I mean, it's like, when the missionaries showed up and began the process of exterminating millions of people on this continent, right? They were very sweet people too. They really sincerely believed in what they were doing, that you had to kill the body to save the soul. The personality and the behavior isn't the issue. It's what they're part of and what they're doing objectively, right? That's what we always need to look at. Otherwise, that's how you get away with crime, behind a sweet smile, right? Like Shakespeare said, a man may smile and be a villain.
Indeed. Click, click. If elites never give up, what's the point in fighting them if we can't ever finally win?
Of course we can win. We're just asleep. All we have to do is shake them off like fleas and they're gone. There's millions of us for every one of them. And so it's the wrong question. You got to look in there and say, why aren't I acting? Why don't I own my own mind? And I'm courageous enough to act as children are being slaughtered as we talk by these people. Isn't that enough to move you? If it isn't, maybe there's something wrong with us, right?
Ron's asking, is the mafia still involved at the government level? The government is the mafia, Ron. The biggest mafia in the world.
That's when I first went to Rome, when I did the exorcism there in 2009, Senator Furio Colombo had dinner with me, and he said, Kevin, you're kind of naive, about the church. And it's because, and I took kind of offense at that, but he said, no, the mafia, the government, the Vatican, they're all the same people. You don't understand. They're all the same people, and they have one concern: money. That's it. Nothing else matters to them. So, and this is like a 70-year-old politician speaking, who'd spent his life in and around power, So, I mean, to see things as they are and not as we want them to be, right?
There's a place where crime and government cozily coexist. So Danny's saying, does this anger you that high-profile murder cases like Charlie's get solved so quickly, while there are so many unsolved homicides all over the country?
Well, his shooting wasn't solved. It's just you see the official version out quickly. Like the official version comes out quick when it's a contrived scenario. Unsolved. They're not unsolved homicides. I mean, we know what happens to people. Like 7 of my friends murdered in Vancouver, all Native, all because they were protesting, right? We know who did it. It's all documented. What are you going to do about it? Well, first of all, not take part in what killed them, and second, try to create something different, right? It's a bigger job than we think, right?
Would elections be fair and to the advantage of the people if money was taken out of elections? Is that like do you mean like the lobbying, all the vested interests? Because they're all bought off. It's bribery, isn't it, basically?
Yeah, well, there used to be a law in America strictly limiting, contributions, and that got changed in the 80s in a big way. In the part of the whole so-called privatization thing, they said, why shouldn't a corporation have the right to give $1 billion to a candidate, right? So I mean, it's yeah, of course it would, but the corruption, like John Adams said, you can't have a republic without a virtuous citizenry. That is, people are concerned about their neighbor as well as themselves, right? So if there's that corruption in you, it doesn't matter if you have money or not; it'll still be corrupted, right? The question is, the problem is not on our stars, but in ourselves, right? Quote Hamlet.
We talked about the private prison industries recently as well, and they contribute tens of millions a year in political contributions to both parties.
Yep.
So whoever wins the election keeps the contracts rolling, and those contracts are in the tens of billions a year. So kicking down tens of millions a year to politicians is small change.
And
these guys.
Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi was a lobbyist for GEO, the private prison company, as recently as 2019, I think. So, I mean, yeah, it's all serving. There was a cartoon way back in the 1800s, and it said the real rulers of the U.S. Senate, and it showed all the politicians sitting in the desk. And then behind them are these big fat cats, and it said the Copper Trust, the Steel Trust, JP Morgan banks, the real rulers of the Senate. That's never changed. you know. So I mean, yeah, I think we all know that. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
What is the best way to find a common law pod in our areas?
Just write to us and we can connect you. We have common law movements in all over North America and Europe and in Australia, and even in places like Eastern Europe and Russia and Spain and Mexico, all sorts. So just write to us.
All right, next one. Are ley lines used for sacrifice?